Ladies and gentlemen, if you can take your seats, please. I hope you had a good evening last night. I hope you had a good first day. I think we had some very interesting presentations and discussions on the first day. Led by the first session where we had some great interaction from the government and from senior automotive associations. And then the evening last night seemed to go very well. The food was fantastic, and I particularly liked the chocolate bomb at the end of the dinner. If any of you were at the dinner, there was the dessert was a big chocolate bomb, which was great fun. And just to clarify, this session is on the supplier's supply chain. If you are here or if you're interested in the CFLP Import and Export Day, that's in the other room just outside. So this is for the supply chain. Also, if any of you need the translation headsets, they're available outside in case you want to ask questions, or if there is any questions or conversation in Mandarin or English, depending on your preference. There is simultaneous translation. And if any of you accidentally took one of the translation headsets back with you or left them in your bag by mistake yesterday, we'd need them. The batteries will have run out anyway, so you need to exchange them. Also, you will find in front of you the evaluation forms, your opinions on the conference, what we can do better, what we can do differently, what we do well. These evaluation forms are very important to us, and we take them very seriously. So before you go, if you are here for the whole day, then please wait till the end of the day. But if anybody's leaving early, please make sure you complete these evaluation forms and give us your opinions. It is your conference. We do this for you to get as much value from it as you can. So if you help us to help you put together the best conference. So to this session, we are looking at the supplier's supply chain. More and more of the pressure, the challenges, the issues are being passed from the car maker to the suppliers. A lot of the responsibility for the supply chain is with the suppliers now. So it's important to hear what they are doing to help build the best possible supply chain to, from, and in China. Once again, we're very fortunate to put a fantastic panel together with two of the leading global parts of, or tier suppliers in Delphi and Magna, and also a global logistics service provider to give us their views on the development of the supplier supply chain. So we've got three presentations, and we'd like to start the first one. I'd like to invite to the stage Jack Huang, Director of Supply Chain from Magna International, China. Jack.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Louis. And actually, I was not prepared to do any presentation. I only committed to a panel member when Louis called me earlier. So I don't know when and why I'm here now, but anyway. I would say my presentation is short, so there's only one slide. I want to say something about Magna, and also how our view of world-class manufacturing and how logistics fit into that whole picture. I'll give you some number of Magna. Last year, Magna did extremely well. The global sales went up to 34.8 billion. It's a record. That haven't happened before. Compared to 2012, it was 30.5-ish billion. So it's more than 10%. More significant, I believe, is the profit, the earning went up 36% to 2013. So also most people probably know Magna is one of the most diversified auto suppliers. And we make pretty much everything other than the windshield glass and tire. Other than that, we have something in a car. So globally, worldwide, we have about 260 plants and over 125,000 people. In China, we are growing fast. We have over 30 plants now, compared to a few conferences ago when I did the speech, we only had like 12 plants back then. So, but also Magna is a very unique company. We are decentralized. That means every plant, or we call them divisions, the general manager is responsible for his or her. By the way, we have our first female general manager within Magna last year in China. So, but the general manager is responsible for his or her bottom line, basically his P&L, and that including the sourcing and all that, good or bad. So what we're talking about is Magna. We recently launched the thing we call world-class manufacturing. So go to the next slide, please. Who's controlling this? Oh, okay, thank you. That's my only slide for today. When people hear manufacturing, people thinking about making things, manufacturing process. So, but we look at it in Magna. We know that manufacturing is not only the factory. Manufacturing, if you want to be a real world class, you have to be, the entire corporation needs to be involved. So this is what we defined, our definition of world-class manufacturing. The core is the life cycle of a product, pre-production, production, and aftermarket. That's normally we see a car in the market. You spend 4 years to develop a car. You spend a couple of years to launch the vehicle. Then the vehicle life normally lasts probably 2 to 3 years. Then you have model change, you have a reflash, then probably the model is phased out and have a new one to replace it. So that's the life cycle of a product. But within this life cycle, every function need to contribute to make the world-class manufacturing happen. If you look at the one we call MagFac, that is the Magna manufacturing or operations system. So most of the company probably look at it, world-class manufacturing, that is the manufacturing system like a Toyota manufacturing system, whatever. But we look at it as all the function that involved that with the parts go into the manufacturing system, you have to be best in class. For instance, we have purchasing, we have logistics, we have leadership, we have innovation, PDP is a program development, and all that, and quality, obvious. So that is the Magna's definition of world-class manufacturing. And we recognize logistics is one of the most important functions in there. I gave the numbers when I start this. We grow over 10%, our earning went up, all that. That means Magna is good in manufacturing. We are good in making parts. And most people probably know Magna started in 1955-ish. I think 1955, the owner started the garage in Toronto, outside of Toronto. Then after 50 years, in 2005, we celebrate our 50 years, then grow up to the size right now. And when Magna started, they were a bunch of German tool makers. They immigrated from Germany after the World War II to North America. So their believing is, you have a good tool, you make good parts. That's Magna's philosophy. I think it's still there. But that is not enough. We realize that. So you need all this to be a world-leading supplier. Also because we are so decentralized. So Magna is not like many of the company our size. We don't have a central logistics function other than Europe. And the reason we have a logistics function in Europe because we have a group called Supplier. And you probably know Magna is the only supplier that's non-OEM, but we are contract manufacturers. We build cars. So the most recognized brand in China, I believe, is the BMW 5X. That was built by Magna in Austria, Graz. And by the way, Graz is one of the city in Australia. There's two famous people from that city. One is Arnold Schwarzenegger, you probably all know, the movie star and the governor of California. And the other one's Franz Jonet, he's the founder of Magna. So back to my subject, that's off a little bit. So that is the, Magna Europe, we do have a pretty good, very good actually, logistics function. But in North America and China, we don't. So in yesterday afternoon, I asked a few questions, and I still challenge the logistics providers here today. If you're willing to work with us, please come talk to us. I want to see a very good case that works in China, works for China export, works in North America. And when I say we don't have a central logistic function, doesn't mean we don't care about logistics. Back in 2007, 2008-ish, we did initiate a buyer council from Shanghai to Toronto. You know, many of the Magna divisions are in the Toronto area. So we have done that. Also, we had learned the lesson. In order to do that, Magna ourselves need to do something. We need to, at least the division need to collect data related to logistics. That's why I also asked yesterday my question about the logistics company. When I say I need a clear cost breakdown for shipping. And in purchasing, we know that, in actually not just purchasing, everywhere. Every function, you know that. You need to have clean data to identify the opportunity and the issues. And we also understand if you have a system, You have data input and output. And we say garbage in and garbage out. You don't have good data input, you don't have a good output. So, again, my message to the 3PL, 4PLs in the world. Magna's here. We are good at manufacturing, but we are not a logistics expert. So we are looking for partners to work with us in China, in North America, in Europe, in the global, that we work together to improve our logistics. And yesterday also from the other presentation, we all know that as a supplier, tier one or the sub-tiers, including logistics, we all under the pressure of the OEMs cost cutting. So we all have to commit it to LTA, long-term target improvement, or that. So the 5% give back, that have to come from everywhere. So again, my message, my challenge is here. Magna's here and looking for people to work with us. And we have a big chunk of business and big opportunity. China, North America, Europe, everywhere. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. I didn't realize we also had that in common as well with Magna, because a lot of people think I look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So that's interesting. But thank you for giving us a good opening introduction and the invitation out there for logistics service providers that people like Jack and others in the conference are looking for the service providers. And on that point, the next presentation will come from a leading global service provider. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Chris Tiffany from UTI Worldwide. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. 早上好。讲中文还是英文吧
Would you like me to speak in Chinese or English?
English. Okay. Thanks. One of the fortunate byproducts of participating in these kind of events is all of the interesting people that we all get to meet and the interesting stories that we can all share. So thank you, Louis, for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you. Next slide.下一页. Okay. So my story begins in Detroit. I don't know if you guys have heard of this city or not, but it used to be the center of the automotive industry. And it's also fairly well known for some of its sports teams. So you've got the Detroit Tigers, which is Deli 老虎棒球队. And you also have the Detroit Lions, which is Deli 狮子橄榄球队. And then also the Detroit Pistons, 火柴队. And of course, you also have a couple companies there like GM, Ford, and Chrysler as well. So I was born and raised in Detroit. And in 2006, I had the opportunity to come to China to be a plant manager at a tier one supplier, which was a JV between a Chinese company, state-owned company, and a US company. And that supplier was not located in Beijing, Shanghai, Tianjin, or one of the major industrial centers, but it was located in a very small place called Guizhou. And next slide. So this is what Guizhou is known for. Okay. So Guizhou is in the red, by the way. So you've got Mao Tai Jiu, right? World famous Mao Tai, fiery hot liquor. Of course, the spicy hot food of Guizhou, with the chilies. And then, of course, you've got the spicy ladies, like Lao Gama, right? Tao Hua Bi. And also, I had to throw in Song Zuying, even though she's not from Guizhou, she's from Hunan, but I need to get the attention of some of the people in the back row. So, yeah, I think this is the first time that Lao Gama and Song Zuying have been on the same slide together. So, thanks for that. So, but the point is that it's known for these great things, but it's not so well known for the automotive industry. So, in 2006, I went to Guizhou, and I was producing automotive parts and supplying the North American OEM market. Next slide. And this is one of the parts that my factory made. It's a transmission oil cooler, aluminum brazed. The Detroit price for this is about 28 bucks, but the Guizhou price was about $13.97. So you can really see that there was a big difference, obviously, in price, huge, right? And for the company that I worked for, this was really a game changer. How can you reduce the price by that much? And I'm putting this slide up here for a reason, because that's what I want to talk about right now, are this concept of game changers. Next slide. So a game changer, obviously China sourcing was a game changer for the company that I work for. But the rise of China itself was also a game changer and continues to be a game changer on the world scene. And in fact, all of the OEMs, a lot of the tier ones that we're talking to, like Delphi, Magna, Johnson Controls, Autoliv, GM, Ford, Chrysler, VW, BMW, Deli, they're always asking us, what's the competition doing? And they're looking for these game changers. What's a game changer? Next slide. This is my definition of a game changer based on what the conversations that I've had with OEMs and tier ones. So a game changer is a radical redefinition of the rules, tactics, and strategy of the game that alters the playing field forever. So this is a change that is so significant that it changes the way the game is played. And the example here that I'm showing is 3D printing. So UTI is a global logistics company, and we also, in addition to doing production logistics, we also do aftermarket. But what's going to happen now with 3D printing when that part does not have to move from India to Detroit or from Hamburg to Shanghai? What happens when the customer goes into the dealership and waits a day and they print out the part? That's a game changer. And what's going to happen to logistic companies that rely on that revenue, freight forward, warehousing? What's that going to do to our business model? What's that going to do to your business model as well? So that's a significant game changer that we're seeing coming. And that's just an example. Next slide. The second characteristic of a game changer is it implies an asymmetric and an almost unfair advantage. So for example, if you've got Lionel Messi and he starts playing for the kindergarten soccer team, that would be a pretty big change, right? And that's key. That's what our clients are looking for, is that advantage, almost an unfair advantage, right? Where the competition cannot even cope. Next slide. And then the third characteristic of a game changer is that they're relative, not absolute. And the example here I'm listing is the internet. So if you say, hey, we're using the internet, that's great. We're using our internet because we're sending our schedules to our tier 2s, and now you can pull down your forecasts and you can update your ASNs online. That's fantastic, but that's 1990s technology. Welcome to the 90s, right? So if you were doing that 15 years ago, that might have been a game changer. It's not a game changer any longer. So these game changers, what might be a game changer for your company doesn't necessarily mean it's a game changer in the competitive market if everybody was already doing it. Next. So some ideas for you to think about, but I have to put at least one slide on UTI. What is our game changer? And this is pretty significant for our company because in 2001 to 2006, UTI went on an acquisition spree where we purchased about 60 different companies around the world. And this was a breakneck acquisition pace. And each one of those companies had at least 1 or 2 systems that we then had to integrate. And what we found is that we couldn't possibly integrate all the systems. So we decided to come up with one system. And that one system is called OneView. And actually, we're rolling that system out right now. It's live in 80% of our countries around the world. And in 6 months, we'll have the remaining 20%. And the reason that we're doing that is because each one of those systems carries a cost. And every transaction that we have in OneView is cheaper than if we had it in 60, 70 different systems around the world. So for us, for UTI, the implementation of a global system for freight forward is a significant game changer, especially in our industry. Next slide. So it's really a question to the audience and also to the panel, to Jack and to Eddie, and to the rest of you. What are your game changers? What are you doing that's different than what your competition is doing? How are you altering the playing field to give yourself an advantage? And if you don't have a game changer, you need to get one, right? And you need to get your own, because somebody else's game changer may not be the game changer for you. So just some ideas to stimulate some discussion, and I hope maybe we can explore the topic a little bit more. So thank you very much. 谢谢大家.
Thank you very much. Chris, that was, again, a very interesting presentation. Game changers, a great topic there, a great idea, something that's logistics as a whole, the automotive industry and automotive logistics have to look more at, trying to do things differently, more innovative, and so on. But next up, the final presentation of this session before we go on to the panel discussion and the Q&A. I'd like to welcome to the podium Eddie Wright, Director of Logistics for Asia Pacific for Delphi. Thank you, Eddie.
Good morning. Let's see. Okay. I am delighted to talk to you guys this morning about some of the things that Delphi is doing in order to keep our plants lean and supplied on time. During my presentation, I'm going to talk about multiple things. I want to make sure that we discuss our customer requirements. We talk about some of the complexities of the supply chain, as well as, what are some of the things that Delphi is doing in order to, handle our customer requirements, and what are some of those solutions, including what Chris was talking about, maybe what are some of those game changers. Okay, so at Delphi, our primary focus is really on making sure that we are solving our customers' problems. That goes to the heart of everything that we do. And the areas that we're focused on, or our mega trends that we're focused on, are the areas of safe, green, and connected. Those are the areas in which Delphi has decided to pursue focusing our customer solutions on. And when we talk about supporting these mega trends, there's a couple of things that I guess should be noted. One, they're very complex. They are very much global. It requires an integrated supply chain management strategy where logistics is a really predominant function in order to execute the business. So let's talk about these complexities and what they involve. Over the next 10 years, Delphi expects to see 50 more cars, 50% more vehicles on the road. We expect vehicles emissions to approach 55 miles per gallon. And we also expect to see a significant increase in automated driving technologies. So at Delphi, we've identified these things that we expect to see, and we're also focused on the technologies in order to get there. So in order to, deliver these, to focus on these global complexities, we really are focused on what are the global innovative solutions in order to address these problems. With 19,000 engineers and scientists, 126 manufacturing plants globally, and over 160,000 people, it requires us to be a global company. It requires global scale. It requires capital. And it requires global capabilities, because that innovation can come at any point or any place in the world. As an example, for China in particular, we've decided to take our Euro 4 technology from Europe and build the plant here in China in order to support China's goal to be at Euro 4 standards. So just a quick overview as we look at what does China represent for Delphi. It represents $2.3 billion in revenue, and it will represent 30% of the company's revenue in the next 4 years. In the next 4 years, we expect to go from 16.5 to $24 billion. And China represents, or Asia Pacific represents 30% of that. So as we look at that, really the challenge is how complex is our supply chain? And again, I talked about, how do we how do we have our global capabilities to support any one region in the world? But as you can see here, we ship from 6,400 supplier locations. We ship to over 25,000 locations in terms of OEMs and aftermarket. We do close to 7,000 shipments globally. So now that we've touched on some of the complexities, really, I want to talk now a little bit about what are we doing in order to really, some solutions. So earlier, I talked to you about, first and foremost, is understanding the customer requirements, which is in our Flow 1. But here, what you see is a more expanded view of our operating system. And what we believe is that exceptional execution is driven through Flow 5. It's also an area where we've decided to take bold action, game-changing type of reorganization and technology in order to deliver value to our stakeholders, as well as focusing on continuous improvement. So in our effort, in our journey, we've decided to create a new organization of an integrated supply chain management structure that, again, where logistics plays a very predominant role in executing our business. So as we look at our operating system, and you'll hear me talk about that a lot, it's very core to what we do at Delphi. If we take a high-level view of global supply management and logistics, you see very much that logistics and GSM is two things. One, we're involved early in the flows 2, as well as in Flow 4 and Flow 5, but also it's very much integrated with things that you see around suppliers, right? So it's not just talking about GSM and supplier and locations, it's also talking about logistics and how do we execute our business. So specifically talking about integrated supply chain and our logistics direction, some of the things that we're really focused on is the pace, the certainty, right? And the strategic agility of our logistics system, being able to deal with those complex environments that we talked about before. So what did we decide to do specifically for logistics? We've decided to essentially deploy a global TMS system, not regional, not international, but global. One platform for all of Delphi's operations around the globe, North America, Europe, Asia Pacific. We're expecting to have system connectivity for both PC logistics and customs, proactive supply chain interruptions, global carbon emissions and visibility, right, and overall supply chain performance measurements. We believe that this is a key enabler for us to have efficient manufacturing globally for our plants. So in the end, keeping Delphi's plants lean and supplied on time, we're focused on really 5 things. One is our operating system, both at an enterprise level as well as at a functional level. We're focused on our supply base and our footprints, ensuring that as much as we can to get those parts out of the region that we actually manufacture in. Full integration of supply chain management activities, production control, logistics, customs, shared metrics with global supply management. At the end of the day, everybody sits down at the table to define how is Delphi is going to execute their business and what are the shared metrics that we all agree to. And then last but not least, really deploying the latest technology that really helps us to continue to support our operations in a lean, flexible, fast reacting supply chain. And I believe that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie, for updating us on Delphi's developments and changes and trying to build a world-class logistics supply chain here in Asia Pacific. So 3 great presentations there from our speakers, but now it's the time for you to participate as the audience, to ask questions, to make comments, agreeing, disagreeing. If you're a car maker or another part supplier or a logistics service provider, we'd welcome your views and questions. If you want to ask a question, firstly, the question can be in English or in Chinese language. And if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand, wait for the microphone so that we can have the translation as well. Say your name and your company name, and then we can take the questions. But I will ask the first question, which is to the panel, about the difference between being a car maker or a vehicle maker and a tier supplier. What's the difference when it comes to logistics, and how, as a service provider, as a logistics service provider, how different is your approach and what you offer a vehicle maker or a tier supplier? So I'll ask that to Jack first from this side. The difference between OEM logistics and supplier logistics.
Okay, I think from my personal experience, I spent 15 years with Ford purchasing, and Ford has a big department we call MP&L. So probably if anyone here have business with Ford, they know this department. And they're responsible for shipping parts from the supplier to our plant. Now, the way I see how OEM, I think the main difference is OEM, they have more power than the tier ones. And also, if you look at the OEMs, they're dealing with us. Magna's, Delphi's, Vistians, Lear's, JCI's in the world. But when look at our supply base, we have suppliers, can be small as a mom and pop shop next door. It could be the suppliers overseas in garage, for instance. So it's more diversified, and also as a tier one, you don't have that much power. When I say power is that you are in the middle, you have OEM on top of you, give you lots of pressure, and you have dealing with the suppliers that they are not so capable to meet the auto requirements. So I think that is what I can see the difference now from also from for Magna, say our supply base in China, and I think we spent time here talking about the logistics in China and all that. And I know that everyone in this room will have a story about how difficult to ship one part from Guizhou to Shanghai, for instance. How much money you pay the toll to the government to get just one piece of part to Shanghai, all that. So that leads to this different strategy. I have to develop a supplier. If I have a plant in Yangtze Triangle River, I don't want to source a part to Changchun, up north. That's common sense. So that means you have more supplier to deal with. The supply base is big. Sometimes you don't have the leverage or the opportunity to source a few, select the good suppliers to optimize your systems and all that. So again, that's just my personal view, and Chris and Eddie can probably add on to that.
Sure. Just to tack on to Jack's comment, yeah, it's interesting because Jack, you've been on the OEM side, now you're on the tier one side, so you've seen both ends of it. From the provider standpoint, obviously UTI, we've got a lot of business with the OEMs. We also, thank you. We also have a lot of business with the tier ones as well, and I think it comes down to variability. With the OEMs, there's very structured ways in which, as a provider or as a tier one, that you interact with the OEM, and it's been that way for years and years. In fact, all of the IT investments, the portals. In the case of Ford Motor Company, they've got CMS 3, GM has their system, Chrysler has its own, and pretty much every OEM has got its own platform or portal. But that forces a certain structure on the system. If you're a tier one, you don't necessarily have that system, and the challenge then as a tier one is how do you manage those tier twos? You've got some excellent tier twos, but then you've got some mom and pops that might make a good part, but then they may not be internet enabled or may not be able to send you EDI. So how do you manage that variability? How do you manage that complexity? And that's really a unmet aspect or unmet segment of the market that I think the 3PLs can fulfill. We can step in and manage some of that complexity. We can set up portals. We can give the visibility. But then it's on us to manage that. And obviously we charge for that. And that's part of our business model. So, but it comes down to variability, I think, in a lot of cases.
I guess the 2 cents that I would add to that, and I guess I would agree with Jack as he focuses on or states about the OEM essentially sets the rules, right? And as the tier one, you're subject to whatever those customer requirements are. And at the end of the day, because they're focused on a singular platform, a singular operating system of whoever the OEM is, they have an advantage, right? They are able to leverage their own operating system, that singular focus, in order to run their business. And I think one can argue that a tier one supply chain is as complex or even more complex than an OEM's supply chain could be. When you deal with a Magna or a Delphi and we have, more than 100 customers, shipping globally, trying to supply each one of those customers to their specific requirements becomes a really daunting task. And at the end of the day, you have to try to build your own synergies. And when you look at the OEMs, they have very large volume, very large spend. And at the end of the day, when you boil down to a tier 1 level, our spend for Delphi cases, is over $500 million. But, you go to some of these OEMs and, there's several billions of dollars just in logistics and freight. So I'm dealing with less money to spend, less money to leverage. I'm dealing with specific requirements. And at the end of the day, it turns into lower, margins I'm able to negotiate with my providers on. And I think they always argue, well, your margins are thin. Well, yeah, right? I'm not the OEM, right? I'm at a tier 1 level. So that's the way it goes, excuse me. So there are big differences, volume, scale, platforms that you're operating on, and those constitute some very large challenges that each one needs to deal with.
Okay. Any questions from the audience yet? Question right at the front here, please.
我想请问那个来自于 Magna 的，我要讲中文啊，来自 Magna 的 Jack 先生和那个来自于 Delphi 的
from
那个
Magna and Delphi from Delphi Eddie. I'm from Beijing, Changzhou Logistics. Last year, in Germany, we became the logistics supplier for Audi in Germany, and together with DB Schenker, we provide logistic services for Audi, and we have learned a lot. Some normal things in China, such like overtime work, and make timely changes according to customers. But in Europe, these have become something impossible in Europe. So for Delphi, for Magna, have you used local logistic companies? And in using the domestic China local logistic companies, what kind of differences have you encountered? And in choosing the Chinese logistic companies, what criteria, what are the most important advantage or strong points you are looking for from China's logistic companies? Let me answer firstly.
在中国的话，因为从 Magna 的角度，我们是每一个工厂，因为在中国有30几个工厂。
We have more than 30 plants in China, so they will do sourcing from suppliers who are in the peripheral areas, and some suppliers, for example, talking about logistics. For example, I got a plant which did packaging box for us. The volume is not very big. We use only several boxes. So they have just used a motor tricycle to send the boxes to us every day because we're not using many of their boxes. At Magna, the peripheral suppliers, they themselves, the suppliers themselves, they will deal with transportation. They will deal with issues of logistics. So Magna is not using lots of China's logistic resources. But if I'm to pick one logistic supplier, I would look into their IT capability, because in the future, as I mentioned, EDI are something very important, very much needed. Being very small, the suppliers may not have EDI, but our logistics provider can give these small suppliers these kind of EDI capabilities. And I have also noticed that in China, China's logistic companies generally, they have a foreign partner. So this is something. Certainly, not every company in every region can enjoy every kinds of advantage. So you can introduce your advantage to us, especially your advantage in collaboration with a European partner. So this is something you do the integration, but if I'm looking for a corporate partner, a logistic company, I would look for their global service capabilities. That's something we'd like to look into, because we are not going to use you only in China. Beyond China, I cannot use the same company. In Asia Pacific, I cannot use the same company. Now, what should we do in other Asian countries? So we should look into their global service capabilities, and be it Chinese or global supplier. If you have the capabilities, then I may pick you as my partner. What's your second question again? My first question is that in collaboration with Chinese logistics companies, what are the difficulties you encounter? Also, to pick a Chinese logistics company, what's the main condition you are looking for? Difficulties, as I mentioned yesterday, we want to see a clear cost breakdown, cost base.
From a Delphi perspective, I guess, do we use local providers? Absolutely. I think probably when you look at our China domestic spend, plus 80% is local, right? We're not necessarily dealing with I3PLs, and it goes back to my earlier point is there's just not enough margin to go around. You know, if you deal, for a domestic perspective, if you deal with a local or a global provider, you know, outsourcing to a local provider, there's not enough money to be made between those two parties for them to be competitive on a Delphi rate. We found it to be very difficult in order to overcome. So absolutely, we deal with local providers. We don't deal with local providers, right? We don't deal with the small guys with, you know, on a bicycle, as Jack was talking about. No, we don't deal with those guys. But we do deal with local providers with good capability, right? And you start looking at what are some of the differences. You know, if I go to a local provider, even one that I think has reasonable technology for the China market, and I asked them about, you know, hey, you know, can you send me an EDI 204, 214? They have no idea what that standard is, you know. But if I go ahead and I talk to my international guys, they know what it is, but it doesn't mean that they can actually employ that here because they may not have those capabilities. So, you know, there are some differences. We do use local providers, but at the end of the day, you know, we're looking somebody with reliable service. You know, if you tell me that you're going to deliver in 12 hours, deliver on 12 hours. If you say that you're going to have me a 2-ton truck, you know, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, have me a 2-ton truck. You know, deliver on the commitments that you say that you're going to deliver on. And then, you know, secondly, we are looking for providers actively that has, you know, enough scope and scale to cover larger parts of China, right? So I'm not necessarily interested in a guy that can only cover the Pudong side of Shanghai or the Jinqiao side of Shanghai. They have to be able to cover certain areas, so they have to have coverage. So, you know, at the end of the day, we're looking for guys that can provide a regional as well as a national presence, much more consistent to what you see in more developed countries. And of course, right, competitive doesn't even need to be stated. You have to be competitive.
我也想插一个句在这儿。
I also like to add something.
You asked Jack and Eddie the question, but just from a provider standpoint, you asked what's the difficulty, and also how do you choose your provider? And from the provider standpoint, we are also finicky. We are also looking for ideal partners or ideal clients, and for us, the ideal clients are not necessarily the most profitable ones, but the ones that realize our value and allow us to show the value in the market. If it becomes a pure commodity game on price, that's a game that is short-lived. So on our side, we're also looking for good mates and good long-term partners that realize that we also have to make a profit. We absolutely have to be competitive, but allow us to show the value that we bring. And to Jack's point, I mean, he's saying it comes down to transparency, and I think it's a wake-up call for everybody. You know, why can't we be transparent in our pricing, and all the elements of the cost are known, but then we agree on what the margin is. I think it's a really valid concept, and we should take that and work from that basis as well. So, thanks.
Chris, do you partner with Chinese or other logistics companies?
Yeah, our strategy in China, actually we acquired a company in 2000 which gave us the footprint of 24 branches in Greater China, but those are wholly owned branches and entities. For certain point solutions or sort of the last mile, we do partner with trucking companies, but that's actually something that's part of our strategy, is to look long-term for a partner. In fact, companies like Tangzhou, with Dr. Chen, you're also an attractive partner for us. So long-term, we see our longevity in the market as definitely partnering with domestic companies that are Chinese. Obviously, we're not Chinese, and to make it here, we need to be local as well.
Mm-hmm. And to Eddie and Jack, just to help us, or help me clarify, how much of your roles are supplying China as opposed to supplying the rest of the world from China?
I think maybe we do 20 to 25% export.
Sure,
Maybe 20 to 25% export. Everything else is Asia Pacific consumption.
Okay.
So it's really small, and it expects to get smaller.
From standpoint, we have I think the number of close. We have about 1/3 of the actually the spend compared to the export than compared to the China spend from the China supply base.
Yeah, and I guess when we say export, I'm kind of referring to the Asia Pacific, right? So Asia Pacific, everything is around at 75-80% number, right? Because again, we consider China to be a large player in the Asia Pacific realm, but when we talk about exports, really, I'm talking about exports to Europe and North America, really, not necessarily to Thailand or Indonesia.
Okay. Throw it open to the audience if there are any more questions from the audience yet.
I'm Marco. I'm from Fiat Chrysler Supply Chain Asia Pacific. And I have a question to Jack. But Jack just mentioned in Magna, there has no central logistics department except European operation. So my question is, the manufacturing in Magna China, is there any system can guarantee that the manufacturing side in Magna provide optimized logistic cost? Yeah, since you have no central, let's say, logistic department, so is there any system can guarantee each manufacturer can provide the optimized logistic cost? Yeah, this is my question.
When I said we do not have a central logistics function, it's not like Magna China or Magna Asian Pacific Logistics. We don't have that. So the logistics responsibility lies on the divisions or the manufacturing plant. Now, there's two sides of the logistics we look at. One is that we ship to the OEMs, for instance. In most of the case, I believe the OEM will designate the provider. We will just make the part on time and ready at the dock, then you come pick up. Now, for the supply base, you say, your question is that we do not have a system. I said, no, we do not have to optimize the system. And that's why I was here earlier saying that the logistics providers, please come work with us. Well, because we don't have to optimize the system that works to actually help us to optimize the logistics costs. So that's something that we recognize. That's a major factor of our world-class manufacturing. So we are working toward that. But again, at the beginning I said, Magna, we are good in making parts. We are good at what we're good at, but we are not expert in the logistics. Now, we may decide to have a organization for logistics, maybe, but at this point, I just don't see how that's going to, because you don't want this drastic change within the company to make things happen that way. So I would go step by step, face by face, work with the logistics providers to see if we can consolidate from a smaller scale to a bigger scale to maybe eventually going to a corporate function. But also we know that whenever you have a function that big, there's something inefficiency going to go in. So we'll look at it, how it works. But right now, I think we are at phase one. The challenge to our own people is that you need to get the data. Once I have the data, we will see if we can consolidate, then we can optimize. So I hope that is answer your question. It's not that we don't have anything, we do, but we want to make it better.
Thank you. Question at the front. Okay.
Yeah, actually it's a question to Eddie, kind of following on that point, because at least on paper, Delphi does seem to be much more centralized than Magna. But obviously you have joint ventures in China and 20-odd plants. So I wondered if in reality you're often having to go up against what the plant wants or what the local decisions, or do you still delegate quite a bit to the local in terms of their day-to-day operations in terms of logistics, or how do you overcome those battles, so to say?
I think one of the things that is fundamental to Delphi is the operating system that I referred to. And when we talk about our operating system, again, it's at an enterprise level when we're talking about how do we run our business, but it's also to a functional level. That same model is all the way down to a logistics level. So I can show you from a corporate perspective how our enterprise operating system within those same flows, and then I can show you at a functional level, then I can even show you at a regional level how we operate within those flows and the processes associated with it. So I think the key piece is that you have to have it documented, and you have to have a way to audit it, and you have to have clear delegations of authority. So, in our example, it's very much written in process, and it's enforceable that the only delegation of authority for logistics comes through our organization, right? It doesn't happen at a plant level. Now, do you find sometimes where you have, improper sourcings that may happen? Absolutely. But I would say by and large, there is no discrepancy on what are the functional roles and who does what. So again, we focus on our operating system at an enterprise level, we focus on it at a departmental level, and we focus on those processes to be able to execute it and then also monitor it. So at the end of the day, we don't find that many issues where people are in violation of what our operating system is.
Chris, as a provider, do you come across these kind of issues?
Yeah, absolutely, because obviously we interact with a lot of different companies every day, and I think of it as sort of a pendulum that swings back and forth between central and decentral. And having worked at a tier one, at a plant level, also a corporate level, the guys at corporate tend to think of the plant guys as pretty tough crowd, dirty fingernails, only focused on meeting the daily production, can't see the big picture. And the guys in the plant think that the guys at corporate push pencils and drink cappuccino all day. So you can tell where I grew up. I was in the plant. So not that I don't like good cappuccino, but I do see it as a pendulum that swings back and forth. Obviously, actually the environment that I sort of grew up in as a tier one was actually a JV with Magna, and we were quite decentralized. And I've also worked in environments where it's quite central, and the plants really have no authority or decision-making power. I think there's trade-offs to both. As a provider, we don't necessarily, the big corporate MP&L departments have their own agenda, and the plants have theirs, and sometimes you need to have a different approach when you work with both. In the case of a decentralized environment, you need to show quick wins, and you need to focus on projects that have immediate ROI and develop that into a business case which is sustaining. And with more centralized focus, you need to have a strategy that focuses on longevity. Excuse me. So, yeah, it goes back and forth, I think, is the point. And even among companies, there's a natural shift towards being decentral and central at different times.
I guess one other piece I'll add that I didn't bring up earlier. As we look at what we've evolved to for China, Delphi has operating authority for all of our plants, right? So for all 21 manufacturing facilities, at the end of the day, we do have a JV partner that we've developed and nurtured, for the last 20 years. But at the end of the day, the operating authority is with the company, not with the JV. So it allows us the ability to actually enforce and execute, on what our operating system is.
Also, I can add on a few words from a purchasing standpoint. From a decentralized, I do see that since we purchasing, they are not logistics experts, so they treat logistics as the same supplier. You quote me a price, logistics. Oh, this guy can ship this part 10 cents cheaper than the other one. He's better. But logistics is not this way. So I'm looking at when I say partner working with Magna, and also I need to have this type of message to send to our own people, to let them know logistics is different. And also we often see quotes from our European or North America divisions. They will send it to the Chinese supplier. They want them to quote DDPDDU, nothing else. All they want to know is that you ship the part to my door. That's it. They don't care about, I'm not saying they don't care, but they don't know what is in there for shipping. So we need to educate them. So I think our partner can help us to do that as well. Thanks.
And sorry, Chris, back to you again. It's not just, the conflict is not just between corporate and plants. Perhaps it's also between the joint ventures and the global corporates. So as a global logistics company, do you find a big conflict when you're providing services where the global car maker says, this is our global policy and this is what I want, whereas the local JV says, yeah, that's what they want from Detroit or Germany or whatever it is, but as the local partner, this is what we require. Do you come across that conflict quite a bit?
Absolutely, we do, and actually, think I mentioned to the group that my background was really in a JV. And the quickest way to get yourself hosed in a JV is to tell one side something and then tell the other side something else. So one of the things that we try to do as a provider is to create one version of the truth. And what I mean by that is it's very difficult to play one side off against the other, because eventually if the JV is stable, the interests are going to converge, and you need to have alignment on both. But we see that quite a bit, and quite frankly, in the China market, there's some clients that we would love to do business with, but are closed off to us because there's a decision made to deal locally. And that's a decision that's based on the operating reality. It's also based on strategies. And in China, you have a term called 地方保护主义, right? Which means you protect the place that you're from. That's the reason when you're in Shanghai that you see Shanghai GM. You see GM cars, but you don't see so many Fords in Shanghai. But if you go to Chongqing, you see quite a lot of Ford, right? And you don't see so many GM. So in China, there's definitely a policy to protect the local provider, the local businesses, and to grow those up organically, and eventually they get on their feet and they have aspirations to compete globally. And that's what we're seeing now, even with the car market. Companies like Qirei, Geely, obviously SGM, SAIC, they're not content for the 18 million vehicles in China. They're exporting. They're setting up OEM factories in Brazil and Thailand and all over the world. And that's really for UTI. That's the exciting thing, because that's the service that we offer is trying to snap those pieces together and look at the next generation of part flows.
Okay, thank you. Question at the front, please.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Ruud Vossenbelt. I have a question about the aftermarket area. I think Jack talked about aftermarket as part of your organization. I imagine also Delphi has aftermarket. How is that organized? I can imagine that's maybe more central organized, and has it similar service levels as it has, for example, in the US or in Europe, or is it very different in China?
I would say at this point, it's more complicated for aftermarket, but I have to go, refer back to my Ford experience. When we have a model that is phased out then all the parts goes into aftermarket, and that in Ford, it's also a full service part department. This is a completely different organization, so they have to deal with different people, and the requirements, everything's different. So as a supplier, we actually, I think we just recognize that you cannot overlook this part. So that's why we have this world-class manufacturing, that's after production as part of that. Now, how we doing it, that is still up to the divisions they're doing. That's something that we need to look into it and do a better job. So here, I really don't have anything to say something I can share with you, but I wish I could. But I think that's the area we really need to look into it. Every company would have to.
So for Delphi, for our aftermarket, we do have a specific division focused on aftermarket entirely, all right, buy and sell. And their value stream, their value chain is much different than our traditional OEM business. And in particular in China, it poses a particular problem because a lot of the things that drive aftermarket sales is brand, especially here in China. we sell product in China that we sell nowhere else in the world, only for the simple fact that it's because of our brand. And people know when they go see a battery, like Delphi doesn't do batteries anymore, but we sell batteries in Asia Pacific because the brand is so strong. So then you get into those situations where you are contract manufacturing and you're worried about, the guy that you're partnering with leave and try to go direct. So, for us, it's, we do have some central models where we do, distribution centers, but, we're finding that that's too expensive. The costs in Asia Pacific are rising too high to have high logistics costs and high distribution. So now I can tell you we're starting to look at how do I create partnerships and enforceable agreements that says that I'm going to allow you to direct ship to my customer, but if you are to backdoor me, then I'm going to cut the 80% of the business that I have with you. So it really becomes a play of, what's the brand that you have, what products you want to sell, what is the distribution model you want to set up, and most importantly, how don't you find, your product being sold out the back door or being sold by your partner that you were in business with. It's very complicated, very much more complicated than Europe or North America.
Any questions? At the front, please.
It's a question across the panel. I mean, Chris mentioned the sort of next generation. You're talking kind of globally, but obviously within China now it's a huge rise to the West, and all the current OEM plants that are being built, many are being built in Western regions and cities. And I just wondered if this is a challenge for you, either in your supply base for the tier suppliers or in your kind of location strategies or filling from your current capacity, and also for Chris from a logistics provider point of view, how you're extending your reach to fill that demand.
I'll take a crack at it first. Yeah, China, West China is booming. It was nice that my first experience in China was not in a big city, but it was in a place like Guizhou, because that to me is where the change in incomes, the affluence of China is most visible, and it's not so much in the Shanghais with the skyscrapers, but it's in those tier 2 cities. And when I say tier 2, I mean you could be talking about a city like Chongqing, which has got 20 million people, Chengdu, Guiyang, Kunming, Xi'an, right? How many Americans have heard of those cities? But they're huge, they're enormous. But if you ask most Chinese, they've heard of Detroit, which has less than 1 million people now. So that's a seismic shift. Our strategy is we have something called the Go West strategy, and it's all about developing the interior of China, looking at regional hubs like Chongqing, where we've got a presence, and then dipping into those tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And then we've got a longer-term horizon where you had Cai Jin yesterday talk about the new Silk Road. And the historical Silk Road went from Genoa all the way to Nagasaki. And obviously it traversed a lot of countries in between, and China certainly was one of the biggest. But we're seeing that new Silk Road happening right now. In fact, I just spent a week in Uzbekistan, and that country really blew me away, because that's not a country that's on the tip of the tongue for most people. But one of our OEM clients has got two huge facilities there with some different ownership structures, and they're producing about a 250,000 vehicles in Uzbekistan. So it's not just China, but looking at countries that are surrounding China, the countries like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan. I mean, those are the next up-and-comers, and I think the companies that are going to be successful are ones that do have a game-changer play that's different from traditional freight forwarding modes to connect up Europe, Central Asia, and China. In fact, I see that as the future of what's going to happen, at least in this region. So.
One of the things that I had in my PPT that we realized is the pace, right? The pace in which things are happening is much faster. So Delphi absolutely has presence in Chengdu and Chongqing. Our operations are doubling in size currently as we speak in order to handle that volume. The problem is not our manufacturing location, it's our supply base. It was just several years ago we were telling everybody to come to Asia Pacific and ensuring that you have a presence. But now that plant you put in Shanghai or Suzhou was not a good location for Chongqing and Chengdu. And it's not realistic for us to ask that of our global supply management department to tell that supplier to put up 5 or 6 different manufacturing plants where their volume may not support it. So really what you boil down to is the ability of your supply chain to adapt to whatever the new location is. So as we take a look at our plants moving from east to interior, the pressure is really put on the supply chain group to figure out how to best optimize whatever we have there. And then the pressure is on our sales group to ensure that we get the right margin for that location that is in the interior where there's no supply base and the logistics is it's not all that great. So again, it's being able to adapt. We also have the Go West strategy, but at the end of the day, our supply chain has to be able to deal with those type of moves that happen year over year, significant growth from existing supply bases, and the regional model, not necessarily local model, but the regional model is where you have to optimize it at.
Well, I think I would go along with Eddie, what he just said, and also from a supplier development standpoint, we know that if you look at every company in China, we all have people issue, how to find people, how to retain people. Now, you have this problem in Shanghai, in those developed area. Imagine what you're gonna face when you have this plant in way west. Who wants to go there, to live there, too? So those are the things you need to, I guess, solve. So, but again, that will supply base and the logistics, all that will need to go hand in hand with the business strategy development. So.
Okay. Any more questions from the audience? At the back on that side.
大家好，我是南京长安民生物流的。
I'm from Chang'an Mingsheng Logistic Company. We a strategic logistic partner to Mazda and third-party PL. And yesterday we talked about decrease of cost and between us and Mazda have gas yearly pressure, but we also have an agreement that is a joint improvement of costs, and so by joint efforts we can control or decrease costs, and we in expanding new businesses and we encounter some suppliers through open tendering. They may choose 2 logistics companies to get quotes from them, and then they show the lower quote to a third company, logistics company. Their plan, their price. We have their plan. We have the price. If you can beat their price, we will choose you. So my question to you is, how do you deal with this kind of situations? Do you have any good suggestions?
OK， 你这个问题实际上对会更多的是对采购的，因为在这
So this question is mainly about procurement. Because in procurement, the price includes the logistics, and you should adopt a logistic perspective. You should help us to educate our buyer, that $1 cheaper. It doesn't mean you'll get in a better situation. So you should, you as a logistic companies, you should educate the buyer to talk about your current volume, how to optimize the logistics, and so the conventional quoting regime would not give us a win-win situation. That's what I speak to my customer, and so if we want to get into partnership with the Chinese logistics companies, you should not just be a supplier, because you as a logistics company could be an expert. You could be an educator. You can be an educator to educate on your customers, and that would give us a win-win situation.
Eddie, but just
Yes.
because you are one of the purchasing guys, Jack. So isn't one of the issues that the RFQ tend to be quite restrictive, that you don't necessarily get the chance to explain to the purchasing guy or to educate them? The request is often, this is what we want, what is the best price that you can give us? So it's hard to educate. You might educate the logistics guy or the operations guy, but and often I even hear from the logistics guys at the car maker or the supplier who says, I understand, but I can't get my purchasing guys to understand.
But I also think, though, we got to be realistic, right? And the cost pressures will never go away. You know, somebody coming and asking you for reductions year over year, that will never go away. I mean, it's the same 10 years back and 10 years forward. It's always going to be there. So I think you must realize that that is the industry that is automotive. It's always competitive. We're always going to come back and say, hey, I need lower prices. And I think at the end of the day, being a provider, we're a provider to OEs, and some of the logistics providers provide us services. You must realize what your business is. You must realize what your processes are and how to continually improve. And we say it, you know, and we sit in these presentations and we talk about being competitive and continuous improvement. At the end of the day, you have to live and breathe continuous improvement to reduce your cost, bottom line. And the customer may not be willing to or have the resources to educate you on continuous improvement. Right? So I think you have to find the means, the training, the tools in order to be self-sufficient yourself, to know your business, know your processes, and to reduce your costs, because at the end of the day, you know, the strategic relationship is about as good as the last quote, right? So we have to make sure that we understand those dynamics won't change, and we must be willing to survive in that market.
Just one point from my side. What we see as a trend is a lot of our large OEM clients are backing away from this annual cycle of procurement, of sending out a bid every year. And I think what they're realizing is that there's huge hidden costs in switching. So for example, if we're operating a control tower with 30 people in Shanghai, does it really make sense to switch that business every year to a different provider who then has to go out and staff, train, cut their teeth on the business, and get it up and running every year? And I think some of the OEMs are wondering if that 5% cost reduction is worth that, or 7 or 8% cost reduction, whatever it is. Is it really worth that? So in that case, as a provider, as Eddie mentioned, you know, data is our friend, and data needs to be our friend, because we need to consistently show the value. We need to consistently show where we're economizing, we're mitigating, we're saving them money. And if we sit back and we just kind of enjoy the fact, that contract will be over very quickly, because there's nothing that I'm sure Jack and Eddie hate the most than a provider that comes in and boasts about how profitable they are. So you know, it's good to make a profit, but you've got to be lean. So we're constantly putting data. We're constantly looking at lean and improvement. We don't do a perfect job, but that's something that we have to focus more on.
And also, I just want to add one thing. When we say cost saving, most of the time people think about cost saving, but sometimes you also need to look into cost avoidance. So that's why I'm saying logistics provider, you're expert in your area. And Eddie said you need to continuously improve your operation to make it lean, to do that. But also, if you can give suggestion to your customer to avoid some cost. We're not a logistics expert. We don't know some of the areas. So you will come up and you will tell us, hey, you ship this way, maybe you do that. The other way is better. You can save 10 cents this way. So, and sometimes that works. So most of the time people look at cost saving, but cost avoidance is a big area that we can probably, there's lots of hidden right there.
Okay, we take a question over there first, and then, yeah.
Okay, my name is Jason Cao from the Nippon Press, South China. I would like to address the questions to Eddie and Jack. Because we all know right now, most of the big car makers, they already launched procurement logistics. They outsourcing their logistics to the professional 3PL, let them to make the milk run operation and setting the RDC to collecting the parts from the tier 1 suppliers. And we also say in the recent years, a lot of the big tier 1 supplier, in our company, we have several cases for the roof systems, the manufacturers or seat manufacturers. They also launched their own procurement logistics from the tier 2 to tier 1. So I would like to ask Delphi and Magna, in your perspective, so what kind of the logistic mode you prefer to? And in the future, you have the intention to do such kind of the procurement logistics? Thank you.
Outsourcing, speaking of logistics, there's two things that we will never outsource. We will never outsource our procurement, which is ran by the logistics department. It's not ran by GSM. It's actually in-house with logistics. So sometimes we don't get into the debates of, is the price too cheap? And by the way, our biggest reduction comes in optimization activities, not even in price to price, so much to what Jack was talking about. So we will never outsource procurement, and we will never outsource engineering. We believe those two things to be core to Delphi that we won't do. The things that we will outsource, like what we were discussing today, is a system. The system in order to execute the business, in order to bring those optimizations, forward to the logistics engineer, we will outsource because we believe technology operates at such a rapid pace that you can never keep up. It's not worth, putting $20 million into an IT system and 2 years later, you go to cloud-based computing or we're in some other phase of technology. So the technology itself, we're willing to be flexible. We're willing to transport our business processes to the next big technology wave, but we will never outsource procurement and we will never outsource engineering. Those are our core attributes to Delphi.
Well, I think Eddie is absolutely right. When we do see that logistics company, they outsource, and also you see that the 3PL, 4PL, they are coming. I think from, again, Magna standpoint, I said from the beginning, we are not expert of logistics. So if someone can come up with, work with us to manage the details, not the directions of that, but the details. The truck from Guizhou to Shanghai, how many stops you're going to make, and how all those systems, the details that someone can manage for us. Yes, those are the obviously that will. I think they will do a much better job than we can do. So those are the that makes sense to outsource.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we've run out of time now, so a very interesting discussion there, saying that There's huge opportunities for logistics service providers to offer services to the suppliers, to the big tier suppliers, and others within the whole supply chain. In fact, they're actually looking for ideas in any way that they can find efficiencies, better quality. So there's huge opportunities out there for you. It's about building a world-class lean supply chain for within China, to or from China, within Asia, and globally. So I'd like to thank the panel for a very interesting discussion there. Thank you. After the coffee break now, we'll be breaking into, or we'll be continuing in the two sessions. In this room, we'll start looking at the plants. One of the big leaps forward in China is the amount of new plants opening. So in this room, we'll be talking about the developments in logistics and new plants. In the other room, we'll be continuing the discussion on imports and exports with a Chinese or automotive export panel. So hope you enjoyed this session, and join us for a coffee break hosted by our friends Jeffco. Thank you.